every living person on Earth speaks. 7 billion mouths forming words right now, in over 7,000 different languages, in bedrooms and boardrooms and classrooms and courtrooms across every continent. We do it so naturally that most of us never stop to think about it. Speaking feels as automatic as breathing. But here is what makes that weird. For roughly 6 million years, our ancestors walked this planet without saying a single word. They survived ice ages, predators, starvation, and migration across entire continents, all without language. They did just fine. So why did we start talking? And more importantly, what was the first word a human being ever spoke? Because whatever that sound was, spoken on the African savanna by someone whose name we will never know, it did not just change human history, it created human history. Nobody was paying attention to these early hominids. Around 2 million years ago, Homo erectus roamed the grasslands of East Africa in small groups, maybe 15 or 20 individuals at a time. They made crude stone tools, they built fires, they hunted in loose, opportunistic packs, and they communicated, but not with words. Picture the African savanna at dusk. A group of early humans crouches near a riverbank. One of them spots a predator in the tall grass, a large cat stalking from downwind. This hominid does not turn to the group and say, "Watch out, there is a leopard behind those trees." Instead, the response is immediate and physical. A sharp exhale, wide eyes, a pointed finger, maybe a bark or a shriek. Something guttural and urgent that the whole group understands on instinct. This is how our ancestors survived for millions of years. Gesture, expression, alarm calls, touch. The same toolkit that chimpanzees and bonobos still use today in the forests of Central Africa. And honestly, it worked. These early humans were not sitting around wishing they could chat. They had no concept of what they were missing. The silent world was the only world they knew. Think about what that means for a second. Every experience, every emotion, every observation about the natural world around them existed without a single word to describe it. A mother could hold her infant close and feel what we would call love, but she had no word for it. A hunter could watch the sun set over the Rift Valley and feel something stir inside him, but he had no way to tell anyone else what that feeling was. The inner life of these early humans was rich and real, but entirely locked inside each individual skull. And this is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. Because somewhere between 400,000 and 200,000 years ago, something started to change inside the human body. Not in the brain, at least not only in the brain. The changes were happening in the throat. If you were to compare the throat of a chimpanzee to the throat of a modern human, you would notice something strange. In chimps, the larynx sits high in the throat, close to the nasal cavity. This is actually a useful design. It means chimps can breathe and swallow at the same time without choking. Very practical. Babies do the same thing, which is why newborns can nurse and breathe simultaneously. But in adult humans, the larynx has dropped. It sits much lower in the throat, creating a larger resonating chamber above it, called the pharynx. This descended larynx is what gives us the ability to produce the wide range of vowel and consonant sounds that make up spoken language. We can shape air into thousands of distinct sounds because of this one anatomical shift. There is a cost, though. Because the larynx dropped, humans are the only primates that can choke to death on their food. Every time you swallow, there is a split second where your airway is unprotected. We traded safety for sound. Evolution decided that talking was worth the risk of choking on a piece of meat. And that was only one piece of the puzzle. The hyoid bone tells the rest. This tiny horseshoe-shaped bone sits just above the larynx and anchors the muscles of the tongue, jaw, and throat. Without it, you cannot speak. In 1983, archaeologists excavating Kibara Cave in northern Israel found a Neanderthal skeleton dating back roughly 60,000 years. And buried in the sediment near its neck, almost perfectly preserved, was a hyoid bone. It looked almost identical to the one inside your throat right now. This meant that Neanderthals, our closest evolutionary cousins, may have had the physical equipment for speech. Whether they actually spoke is still debated among researchers at universities from Cambridge to Stanford. But the hardware was there. The microphone was built. The question was whether anyone had learned to use it. Then came the genetic evidence that changed the entire conversation. In the early 2000s, researchers at Oxford University were studying a family in London known in scientific literature as the KE family. Several members across 3 generations shared a severe speech and language disorder. They could not coordinate the fine mouth and tongue movements needed for clear speech. They struggled with grammar. They had difficulty understanding complex sentences. When geneticists sequenced their DNA, they found the problem. A single mutation in a gene called FOXP2, located on chromosome 7. One tiny error in one gene, and language fell apart. This discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig began comparing the FOXP2 gene across species. Mice have it, birds have it, chimpanzees have it, but the human version is slightly different, carrying 2 specific amino acid changes that no other primate shares. And when scientists dated the emergence of these mutations, the estimate came back to roughly 200,000 years ago, right around the time Homo sapiens first appeared in the fossil record in East Africa. To understand how wild this finding was, consider what the researchers did next. They took the human version of FOXP2 and inserted it into laboratory mice at the Max Planck Institute. The mice did not start speaking, obviously, but something did change. The modified mice produced different ultrasonic vocalizations than normal mice. Their neurons grew longer dendrites. The circuits in their brains associated with learning and motor coordination rewired themselves in subtle but measurable ways. A single gene, tweaked in 2 small places, physically altered the brain architecture of a completely different mammal. Songbirds provided another clue. Zebra finches in research aviaries use their own version of FOXP2 when learning new songs from adult birds. When scientists disrupted the gene in young finches, the birds could still produce sounds, but they could not learn the complex song patterns that normal finches pick up during development. They babbled. They repeated fragments. They never quite got the melody right. Sound familiar? That is remarkably close to what happened with the KE family in London. So here was the picture forming in laboratories and lecture halls around the world. The throat had reshaped itself over hundreds of thousands of years. The hyoid bone had settled into position. The brain had been expanding for millions of years, building the neural architecture needed for complex thought. And then, like a key turning in a lock, a small genetic mutation may have connected all these pieces together. The hardware was ready. FOXP2 may have been the software update that brought it all online. The stage was set, but what was the first word? This is where things get genuinely interesting, because nobody knows, and linguists have been arguing about it for over a century. One theory, championed by researchers at the University of Montreal, focuses on the sounds babies make. Across every human culture on Earth, from the Inuit communities of northern Canada to the Maasai villages of Kenya, babies produce the same basic sounds: ma, da, ba, pa. These are the easiest sounds for the human mouth to produce, requiring the simplest coordination between lips, tongue, and breath. The word mama, or something close to it, exists in an astonishing number of unrelated languages: Mandarin, Chinese, Swahili, English, Quechua, and dozens of others. Some linguists believe this is not a coincidence. They think the first human words may have been these simple, instinctive baby sounds, adopted by adults as labels for the people and things closest to them. Another theory suggests the first words were not names at all, but warnings. Vervet monkeys in the savannas of southern Africa use distinct alarm calls for different predators. One call means eagle, a different call means leopard, a third means snake. Each call triggers a specific survival response. The eagle call makes the group look up and dive into bushes. The leopard call sends them scrambling up trees. The snake call makes them freeze and scan the ground. Some researchers believe early human words evolved from similar alarm calls, becoming more specific and more varied over time until they crossed the line from instinctive signal to intentional symbol. A third camp argues the first word was probably a verb, not a label for a thing, but a command to act, move, stop, give, look. The logic here is that cooperation requires coordination, and coordination requires instructions. If you are trying to hunt a large animal with a group, the ability to say something like push or wait or now gives your team an enormous advantage over any group that has to rely on gestures alone. There is even a fourth theory worth mentioning, sometimes called the grooming hypothesis, proposed by the anthropologist Robin Dunbar at the University of Oxford. Dunbar argued that as hominid social groups grew larger on the African plains, physical grooming, the way chimpanzees bond by picking insects off each other, became impractical. You cannot groom 15 friends in a day and still have time to eat. Language, Dunbar suggested, evolved as vocal grooming, a way to bond with multiple group members at the same time through gossip, small talk, and social chatter. In other words, the first words were not warnings or commands. They were the prehistoric equivalent of, "Hey, did you hear about what happened between those two last night?" The honest truth is, we may never know. Language does not fossilize. You cannot dig up a word the way you dig up a bone. Whatever that first word was, it evaporated into the air the moment it was spoken, leaving no trace in the archaeological record. All we have are theories, comparative studies, and the echoes of that moment preserved in the structure of every language spoken today. But we do know what happened after. And this is the part that still does not make sense when you really think about it. Because the emergence of language did not just give humans a new skill, it detonated an explosion of capability that nothing in the previous 6 million years of hominid evolution could have predicted. Before language, hunting was reactive. A group might chase down a wounded animal or scavenge a carcass left by a larger predator on the open plains. After language, hunting became strategic. Imagine being able to say something like, 3 of you go to the river, 2 of you wait behind the ridge, and when the herd moves toward the water, we close in from both sides. Suddenly, a small group of humans with wooden spears could take down animals 10 times their size. Coordinated hunts on the prehistoric grasslands became so effective that entire species of megafauna began disappearing within a few thousand years of humans arriving in new territories, from the woolly mammoths of the Siberian steppe to the giant ground sloths of South America. And hunting was just the beginning. Language made trade possible. If 2 groups of early humans met near a freshwater lake, they could now negotiate. Your group has obsidian for cutting tools. My group has dried fish. Before language, this kind of exchange was risky and confusing, limited to cautious gestures and mutual suspicion. After language, you could establish terms. You could make promises. You could threaten consequences for breaking those promises. The entire concept of an agreement, something 2 parties commit to with words, was born in these early exchanges. And from that seed, every marketplace, every contract, and every handshake deal in human history eventually grew. Planning changed too. Before words, you lived in the present. You responded to what was happening right now. The rain falling, the fire dying, the baby crying. After language, the future became a place you could visit in conversation. You could discuss what might happen when the dry season arrives. You could make plans for where to camp when the river floods. You could argue about the best route to take through the mountain pass that your grandmother once described. That last part is the one that deserves extra attention, because language did not just connect people in the present, it connected people across time. Before speech, every piece of knowledge a human acquired died with them. A woman who figured out that certain berries were poisonous could warn her children through gestures and expressions, maybe. But the specificity of that knowledge, which berries, which season, which part of the plant, was nearly impossible to transmit without words. Every generation had to relearn the world from scratch. Language ended that cycle overnight, at least in evolutionary terms. Suddenly, a grandmother could sit by the fire in her shelter and tell her grandchildren exactly which plants to avoid, which animals were dangerous at night, which caves flooded during storms, and where to find fresh water during drought. The entire accumulated survival knowledge of a lifetime could be transferred in a single evening of conversation. And the people who received that knowledge lived longer. They survived more. They had more children. And they passed the knowledge on again, adding their own discoveries to the growing library of spoken wisdom. Each generation started a little further ahead than the last. This is the ratchet effect that anthropologists talk about. The idea that human culture accumulates because language lets us build on what came before instead of starting over every 30 years. No other species on Earth does this. Dolphins are smart, crows use tools, elephants mourn their dead, but none of them stack knowledge across generations the way humans do. And the only reason we can is because someone, a very long time ago, figured out how to turn a thought into a sound that another person could understand. This is also where storytelling entered the picture, and it changed everything in ways that go far beyond entertainment. The oldest stories we know about were not told for fun. They were survival manuals, wrapped in narrative. Across indigenous cultures, from the Aboriginal communities of Australia to the oral traditions of West African griots, ancient stories encode practical knowledge in memorable form. A tale about a trickster god who angers the river spirit might actually be a warning about seasonal flooding patterns. A legend about a warrior who eats the wrong fruit and loses his strength might be a lesson about toxic plants disguised as a hero narrative. Stories worked because they were sticky. The human brain is not built to remember lists of facts. It is built to remember characters, conflict, and resolution. Wrap a survival lesson inside a compelling story and people remember it for decades. Tell the same lesson as a flat instruction and it is forgotten by morning. The campfire circles of ancient Africa were not just social gatherings. They were classrooms. They were libraries. They were the original content platforms, if you want to think about it that way. Researchers studying the Aboriginal Australians have found oral traditions that accurately describe geographical events dating back over 10,000 years. Stories about rising sea levels flooding coastal plains, about volcanoes that erupted in what is now the state of Victoria, about lakes that dried up at the end of the last ice age. These are not vague metaphors. They contain specific details that modern geology has confirmed. 10,000 years of accurate information transmission passed from mouth to ear across 400 generations without a single written word. That is the staying power of a good story told in a living language. And stories did something else that turned out to be just as important. They created shared identity. When a group of humans all knew the same stories, they shared a common understanding of who they were, where they came from, and what mattered. This is the foundation of culture. Before language, a group of early humans was just a collection of individuals who happened to live near each other. After language, and specifically after shared stories, they became a people, a tribe, a civilization in embryo. This is what made migration possible on a scale that no other species had ever achieved. Starting around 70,000 years ago, small bands of Homo sapiens began leaving Africa. They crossed the Red Sea into the Arabian Peninsula. They moved along the coastlines of South Asia, reaching Australia by about 65,000 years ago. They pushed north into Europe, east into Central Asia, and eventually across the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas. And as they moved, their languages moved with them, branching and splitting like rivers flowing downhill. A group that split off and headed east lost contact with the group that stayed behind. Over hundreds of years, their pronunciations shifted. New words emerged for new landscapes, new animals, new challenges. The original shared language fractured into dialects, then into separate languages, then into entirely distinct language families that sounded nothing alike. This is how we ended up with over 7,000 languages spoken on Earth today. From the click languages of the Khoisan people in southern Africa, which may be among the oldest language families on the planet, to the tonal complexities of Mandarin Chinese, to the vast vocabulary of English with its hundreds of thousands of words borrowed from dozens of other tongues. Every single one of these languages traces its ancestry back to that same evolutionary moment on the African savanna, and the diversity itself became a kind of engine. Different languages developed different strengths. The Inuit peoples of the Arctic developed a vocabulary with dozens of precise terms for snow and ice conditions because their survival depended on reading the frozen landscape correctly. The Piraha people of the Amazon rainforest in Brazil speak a language with no fixed words for specific numbers, reflecting a culture that measures the world in relative rather than absolute terms. The Aboriginal Australians of the Western Desert use cardinal directions instead of left and right, saying things like, "The cup is to the northwest of the plate," which means every speaker maintains a constant mental compass. Language did not just reflect how people lived, it shaped how they thought. Pay attention to this next detail, because it explains something important about the modern world. Language did not just diversify as humans spread across the globe, it also deepened. The more complex a society became, the more complex its language grew to match. Early words were probably concrete and immediate, labels for things you could see and touch and eat. But over thousands of years, humans developed words for things that do not physically exist: justice, loyalty, tomorrow, debt, hope. These abstract concepts have no shape, no color, no weight. You cannot point to justice the way you can point to a rock, but language made them real by giving them names. And once an abstract idea has a name, people can discuss it, argue about it, build rules around it, and organize entire societies on top of it. This is the leap that took us from campfire circles to courthouses, from hunting parties to standing armies, from oral traditions to written constitutions. And it happened because language kept growing, kept adding layers, kept finding new ways to represent ideas that previously existed only as feelings or instincts. The written word was the next earthquake. For most of human history, everything was spoken. Knowledge, laws, agreements, stories, all of it lived in memory and was passed mouth to ear, generation after generation. This worked remarkably well for small groups, but it had limits. Human memory is imperfect. Details shift with each retelling, and when a storyteller dies, any knowledge that only they carried dies with them. Around 5,000 years ago, in the river valleys of ancient Mesopotamia, the Sumerians began pressing wedge-shaped marks into wet clay tablets. This was cuneiform, one of the earliest known writing systems. The first written records were not poetry or philosophy. They were inventory lists, grain shipments, tax records, how many goats this farmer owes the temple. It was accounting, basically. Bureaucracy gave birth to literature, which is kind of funny when you think about it. But writing did something that speech alone never could. It froze language in place. A spoken word disappears the instant it is uttered. A written word endures. It can be read by someone 1,000 miles away or 1,000 years in the future. Suddenly, a king in Babylon could send precise instructions to a general on the border without whispering them through a chain of messengers who might forget or distort the message along the trade routes of the ancient Near East. A merchant in Ur could record a contract that both parties could reference later if disagreements arose. A priest could write down a prayer that would be recited identically for centuries after his death. Writing also changed what language could do. Spoken language is inherently linear, one word after another, one sentence after another, disappearing in real time. Written language can be studied. You can go back and reread a sentence. You can compare two documents side by side. You can spot contradictions, build arguments, and refine ideas in ways that are nearly impossible when everything exists only in the flow of conversation. Philosophy, mathematics, formal logic, all of these disciplines exploded after writing gave thinkers the ability to pin their ideas to a surface and examine them from multiple angles. The scale of human coordination exploded. Writing made empires possible. It made legal systems possible. It made science possible, because observations could be recorded and shared across generations without degradation. The library at Alexandria in ancient Egypt held hundreds of thousands of scrolls, representing the accumulated knowledge of the entire Mediterranean world. Imagine trying to maintain that body of knowledge through oral tradition alone. It would have been impossible. Every leap in communication technology since then has followed the same pattern. The printing press in 15th century Germany did not invent new ideas. It made existing ideas spreadable. The telegraph in the 1800s did not create new words. It made words travel at the speed of electricity instead of the speed of a horse. The telephone, the radio, the television, the internet, every single one of these inventions is a direct descendant of that first moment when a human opened their mouth and turned a breath of air into meaning. And that brings us to right now. You are watching this video because of language. The script was written in language. The narration was produced through language. The algorithm that recommended this video to you operates on language, passing titles and descriptions and comments to figure out what you might want to watch next. The device in your hand or on your desk was designed by engineers who communicated through language, manufactured by workers who followed instructions written in language, and marketed with slogans crafted in language. Consider the sheer absurdity of what language lets you do right now. You can pick up a phone and speak to someone on the other side of the planet in real time. You can read a book written by a person who died 3,000 years ago and understand exactly what they were thinking. You can type a few words into a search engine and access the collected knowledge of every civilization that ever existed. None of this would be possible without that first word. Every text message you have ever sent, every argument you have ever had, every joke that made you laugh so hard you could not breathe, every promise someone made to you that they kept or did not keep, every law that protects you, every song that moves you, every lie that fooled you, all of it, every single piece of it, traces back to one moment in evolutionary history when a primate on the African grasslands made a sound that was not just a noise, it was a word. We do not know what that word was. We do not know who said it, or whether anyone around them understood it at first. We do not know if it was greeted with confusion, or fear, or something like recognition. But we do know what it led to. It led to everything. Every civilization, every religion, every scientific breakthrough, every work of art, every declaration of war, and every declaration of love. That one word, spoken into empty air by someone whose bones have long since turned to dust, is the reason you and I can share this moment right now. 6 million years of silence, and then a single sound cracked it open. We have not stopped talking since, and honestly, looking at where it got us, it is probably the best thing our species ever did. If this video made you think about language in a way you had not before, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling us what you think the first human word might have been. We put out new deep dives like this every week, so tap that like button and we will see you in the next one.